Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we go with another episode where I have the opportunity to chat with an accessibility practitioner. And today I am speaking with Sharyn Morrow. Hello, Sharyn. How are you today?
Hi, Joe. Happy Friday. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you as well. We're just coming out of the holiday periods, and I'm in my home office today on Vashon Island, which is near Blink's headquarters in Seattle. Where are you talking to us from?
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, also my home office. You can kind of tell. We've just gotten 15 inches of snow this week, which is excessive even by Minnesotan standards.
Well, I think that kind of thing's happening all across the country, it seems like. But at least we're both here and warm and dry, and we can
And working
talk
remotely.
about
Yeah.
accessibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, one of the things I enjoy doing with this program is finding out how people made their way in their career in accessibility through either and or their lived life and work life experiences. So maybe take us back, and where does it start with you, where you became aware of accessibility and started to consider it as a profession?
Sure. So I'll just start with my current role is a principal accessibility engineer in the Center of Excellence at a SaaS company, but I've had a very unconventional career path. I grew up in a very small neurodivergent family in the 70s and 80s. I'm solidly Gen X. I have just two first cousins, and the oldest one is the first autistic person that I knew, and he needs a little more support. My now adult son is also autistic, but he needs less support these days. Myself, I wasn't identified as neurodivergent until I was in my 40s. Often a lot of people in my generation who are identified female as at birth were not evaluated or screened for autism, ADHD, that kind of thing. So it took until I was in my 40s to get my diagnosis, and things are making so much more sense now. So I've spent a lot of my adult life advocating for my son and advocating for others, and now I'm finally advocating for myself and my own lived experience. But in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, my brother and I were early adopters of tech. We were huge nerds, big Star Wars fans. We had Pong, we had an Atari 5200, we had a Commodore 64. Unfortunately, my brother died when I was in 10th grade. And I'd been a good student before that. We were both in gifted and honors programs, but I was grieving and unsupported. So I'm amazed that I even made it through high school at all. But I lucked into a course that really changed my life. And so it was in my junior and senior years of high school, there was a 2-hour class every day that was part graphic design, part photography. And this is back in the days of the old Macintosh classics, and we called it desktop publishing back then. And so right after high school, as a teenager, I was just turned to 18. Instead of going to college as I'd hoped, I landed a full-time job at West Publishing. They're now Thomson Reuters. So there I had this interesting job that nobody else wanted. And I was downloading data from bulletin board systems and marking it up in SGML, which was, the precursor to HTML. So that was for an legal research tool, was an early online tool called Westlaw for attorneys. But learning SGML made it really easy to learn HTML just a couple years later. So this was back when the internet was still being referred to as the information superhighway or the information autobahn. And so that job, I mean, this is the early 90s. Our department made the move from dumb terminals to personal computers, and the staff was in a complete uproar. I was so excited. I was like, oh, we're getting new computers. Awesome. Everybody else, this was the first time I realized how uncomfortable some people are with change. And so even though I was barely out of high school, I was tasked with training my coworkers how to use the new computers because I was patient and I was calm and I was energetic and enthusiastic. And this was my first experience with teaching and mentoring, but I've always enjoyed sharing my knowledge. So after that, I wound up working in the public sector for a while at the state of Minnesota. There I was a graphic designer and front-end web dev. through the mid 90s, they didn't even know what to classify us as yet. They were like, are you clerical? Are you professional? We don't know what to do with you. I moved back to the private sector after that.
Yeah,
I even wound up
if I
doing,
could just
oh yeah,
jump in for a second, we already
sure.
got through a lot of stuff, and I just
I
wanted
know.
to check in on a couple of things. But I think you mentioned in high school that there was some class that you did that sparked your
Yeah.
interest. What was that?
So it was a 2-hour class every day. Mr. Scunberg, I got to send him a thank you note. So it was a graphic design class where we were given, you know, film cameras, but we were also doing design on those Macintosh classics. And we did some offset printing, and it was all about communication. And that was that's been my interest throughout my career. That's the through line, is communicating information to other people. And I really loved that class. It was the only time I perked up during the day. Was, I still am a photographer. That's my hobby, but my career has always been getting information to other people. And that's where that class sparked my love of it. And even though it was like those ancient boxy Macintosh classics, and then we moved on to like Word Perfect 5.2, and then into the Adobe products like PageMaker. So I've just been adapting whatever, adopting new products as they come through. Like now it's Figma, and it's way more collaborative, which I love. So that class. Little did I know in 1990 that I'd be using Figma today and teaching other professionals how to build their mockups in an accessible way. But that's how it all like comes together.
Yeah, well, it's
And
good to
yeah,
hear that you're able to get that boost at that time, and I think you mentioned that then you had your own neurodiversity challenges. Was that when you were growing up?
yeah, so I didn't realize what was going on when I was growing up. I just always felt like I don't fit in what's happening. And I was younger for my grade and smaller and, considered a little bit weird always. And it wasn't until much later that I realized, like, okay, so I have an auditory processing disorder. I'm super extroverted and I like being around people, but large groups of people, I find it really difficult to process information, or I process information too quickly and I'll finish somebody's sentence and they don't like that. I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. So a lot of what is going on with me is, similar to people on the spectrum, similar to ADHD. Technically, I was diagnosed with developmental PTSD and an auditory processing disorder and misophonia. So it made being in the workplace as well like difficult. So working remotely has been so much better for me to be able to focus with a headset on, focus on somebody who's speaking on Zoom. I miss less this way. I mean, I do enjoy being around other people and going to conferences or being, on site once in a while, but it was very exhausting. I didn't realize how exhausted I was day after day being in the office for 25 years or however many years I was in the office in a cubicle with white noise and bad acoustics. And then the open office just about killed me. I remember the old days when I had my own office and I could shut a door that I could focus. And then when I was able to wear headphones really helped me. But so it's just been the last few years that I've been able to really advocate for myself and what works the best for me. And working remotely is great.
And so then, as you were, working through kind of web development, design work, when was it that accessibility became something that you thought you might want to be involved with, or you were involved with for your regular work life?
Sure. So in the year 2000, which is hilarious to say now, but I was working at an ad agency and they had us updating these Flash files for the BMW USA website. And I kept pushing back. Yes, I knew how to edit the Flash files, but Flash files were not remotely accessible. And it wasn't just for, like screen reader users. It was also, back then, not everybody had higher speed internet connections. Not everyone has higher speed internet connections. So it was a fact of like, okay, you're trying to reach these users and you're using this Flash technology that is garbage and nobody can, only a small percentage, and this is before people got into using analytics to track what users were doing and that kind of thing. Now we have Pendo and a million other tools, but they were just basically designing websites for other designers to look at. It felt like they just wanted to like garner awards. I'm like, don't you think the customer is actually trying to convey information to more end users? And their solution at the time was to have us build out a static text file. Like, that's not the same thing. Like, you want to give them the product specs, but just a text file version. And I'm like, that's not equitable. And so after that, I was in that role for a few years, and then I went to another company that was hybrid kind of ad agency, technology, web hosting company. And I stayed there for 10 years, and I loved that company, and I was really working to figure out how all the pieces fit together. So I started as a front-end web developer, but I was also a QA tester. I helped the sysadmin team. I wrote bash scripts to automate things. But my love, oh gosh, I also got sucked into security testing. So like, yeah, that was not not my bag, even though I could do it. What my real love was again just conveying that information to the end users. So there I started pushing more for accessibility as well, and I left there to go work for, do you know the company SiteImprove? They
Mhm.
have the automated accessibility testing. So I took a role there in 2015. I started out supporting their automated testing tools, but then I became a manual accessibility tester. But I worked also internally with the teams building out the design system for the platform on the automated side. So I was there for about 6.5 years, and then I left because I was able to find roles that were kind of more in line with the work that I want to do. And while I was at SiteImprove there, I also started teaching part-time at a local college, a community college in Minneapolis. So I was teaching the basics of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and design, but with a focus on accessibility and semantics, because so much of that is left out of computer science programs. Like, nobody really is yet emphasizing the need for accessibility while they're teaching the next generation of computer science professionals. But so in the last couple of years, I've been able to find roles that allow me to utilize the breadth of my experience. So I'm advising designers when they're building out new components and mockups in Figma. I'm working with developers when accessibility questions come up or defects come up. I'm running accessibility training sessions for different audiences. So like an accessibility 100 level for a wider audience, maybe salespeople or marketing folks, or even sometimes the computer support, like the first line support folks. Then accessibility 200 level for the developers, and talking more specifically about React or definition of done, general process, like specific questions. We're also, I'm writing documentation, I'm hosting monthly accessibility community of practice meetings, planning GAD events, researching and procuring new accessibility testing tools. So it's a role that kind of touches every part of accessibility, and just really, I'm so much more passionate about accessibility than anything else. I've always been excited about the web, but just accessibility gets me so much more invested and excited, and it just boils down to wanting to get information to the people who need it. And so that's why lately,
Well, yeah, if
innovation.
I could
Oh
just
yeah, go
jump in
ahead.
again. Yeah,
Yeah.
let me just ask you, so as you were, starting to do more accessibility specific work, what was the way that you started to, learn techniques and issues and how to get past challenges? Did you have some mentors, or did you take certain courses, or just reading? How did you fill that part of your professional self out?
Sure. So at SiteImprove was really the good starting point because there's so many connections, and a lot of folks there, went to CSUN. I didn't get to go to CSUN. The last year it was, COVID hit. That was when I was going to go. But um, I've followed a lot of different folks online, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I love the disability community on Twitter. I'm bummed that Twitter is being ruined and they fired their entire accessibility team. But I've got my CPAC through IAAP, and I'm also studying to get my WAS, so then I'll be a CPWA after that. I'm constantly seeking out new information and trying to get the most accurate read on things. The more you learn about accessibility, though, the more it's like, oh, I've reached this point, but now there's this tricky question, and who can I talk to about this? But there's a wide community of folks to reach out to that's been really great. And like, I've got the Paul J. Adams bookmarklets. And what really helped was testing, doing manual accessibility testing, and seeing how other developers built templates and built their sites, and thinking back to how I used to build websites for years. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have built things that, I mean, in the early days, we were building all of our layouts with table code, which is terrible. And then it was div soup after that. And now it's like, oh, we can simplify and build things in a semantic way. So seeing so much other code really helped me realize how we could do these things in a better way, a more effective way, a more sustainable way, especially something that we can maintain in the future. It's been really fascinating.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that SiteImprove activity definitely gave you a lot of time to work, time to dig into those special skills. And then it's, of course, always good to see people getting involved with the IAAP certifications. Not that, I mean, we know what we know, but the certifications, I think, to me, are just as helpful in just helping other people understand that, that there are organizations that are there to help kind of guide us and build our profession, and just provide a little bit of extra awareness outside of our profession, in terms of how we acquire our skills.
Yeah, and getting certified just gave me a little more self-confidence. Earlier in my career, I might have had more imposter syndrome, but now I'm like, oh, wait, I did learn along the way quite a bit. And I do feel more confident in teaching others what I know and trying to share the knowledge. So last year, I was involved with, there was an accessibility next gen program that folks are trying to get launched. And I'm not sure where it's at this year, but last year I was able to mentor somebody locally, and she went on to take her CPAC and pass it. So that was really cool because she's more of a back end dev, but she's trying to become more full stack and incorporate accessibility. She works for the local county here. And so she's, working a lot of products that are public facing. So she wants to make sure they're accessible, which is great to hear. So that I think we need more programs like that. So what I've been seeing more lately, it's we need to balance. So innovation is great as long as it's done ethically. I've seen a lot of folks having fun with AI and like Chat GPT and how the intersection of AI and accessibility, but I'm concerned less about that seems like the more fun, glamorous side of things. The stuff that I'm more concerned about now is how so much of the web and SaaS products out there are aging, and some content can be migrated, but so much out there it's not accessible. It needs to be retired or completely rebuilt with simplicity and usability and accessibility in mind. And I feel like we need to grow our community with more practitioners who understand the basics of accessibility, like the nuts and bolts of it, and folks like us who can explain to designers or developers, or product owners, project managers, upper management, any stakeholders to convince other people to adopt these standards and really shift accessibility left. So eventually it would be great if, all team members had an understanding of accessibility so they wouldn't need subject matter experts like us. So I just want to like automate myself out of a job, which I used to do back in the days when content management systems came around. Like, I remember a time, I'm sure you remember too, when businesses and other orgs didn't think they needed a web presence, that the internet wouldn't catch on, that it was just a fad. Like everybody except David Bowie thought it was a fad. I don't know if you ever saw that video of David Bowie talk about the internet. It was fantastic. You can find it on YouTube. But so there was a time when you would ask your friends, oh, does your company have a website yet? And eventually that became the norm. And then later, content management systems cropped up. And, there was a time when it was unheard of for non-technical staff to publish a web page, like at an academic institution or a business. It was always a technical person, the webmaster or whoever. But then content management systems, became commonplace, and everybody can publish content to the web now. And then there was resistance to like a mobile first approach, but now responsive design is the best practice and people, accept that. So My hope is that we'll reach a tipping point where it's generally accepted that accessibility is a must-have to communicate effectively. And that's what I think it all boils down to, is just giving and receiving and sharing information. So hopefully we'll get to that point. I don't know when. I can't look into a crystal ball and figure that out.
Well, usually around this time in the program, I ask, kind of what people kind of summarize things and what they think is important. And you just kind of went through a great list there of the things that, that you were, concerned and excited about. So it was great to hear that.
Yeah. And then one last thing, just to say that, I know other folks have said this on the program too, but disability community is not a monolith, but I do feel like more disabled folks need to get hired into these positions. And we just need to be, the whole nothing about us without us. There's not enough disabled folks working these days. I mean, it's getting better. I think the pandemic and remote work has improved that for a lot of people I know, but we can do more. And also more user research, more actually talking to disabled folks about, like, hey, how do you use the web? How do you use this app? How does this work for you? Like, shifting all the way left, doing user research, designing, solving actual problems that people need solved. So
Yeah,
that's my yeah.
that definitely is still a gap area, and
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you that there's been improvement in that area, but I think there's a long way to go in terms of making sure our foundational research is bringing in as many different people with different experiences as possible, and so there's a lot of work to do in that area, as well as the idea of having people on our accessibility teams who have a variety of the challenges that we work with,
Mhm.
and I think that's another area where we can do some work in terms of employment.
Totally. So I'm hopeful for that, and we'll see what happens.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Sharyn. I appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time to chat with me today. And I know I will be going to see Sun this year. Are you going to it this year?
We're doing AxeCon. It's such a
Oh, all
bummer that
right.
they're at the same time, because I love them both. But yeah, we're big DQ fans, so we're gonna be doing AxeCon.
All right, good. Well, either I'll see you at an online event or maybe a physical event sometime in the future.
Hopefully, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Thanks
Awesome.
a lot.
Thank you.